Elijah Wade was 41 years old, a logistics operations manager who spent his career moving things from where they were to where they needed to be, on time, without excuses. He kept a thermos of black coffee on his desk every morning by 5:45. He drove a navy blue Silverado he'd owned for 8 years. He was not a man who made decisions quickly. He read the full contract before he signed. He ran the numbers twice. He slept on anything that mattered before he committed to it. He had thought about the kidney donation for 6 weeks before he said yes. His wife, Camille, had been on the transplant wait list for 14 months when the matching results came back. He was compatible. The surgeon had explained the risks with the careful precision of someone who understood that clarity was a form of respect. Elijah had listened. He had asked 3 questions. He had asked them again on a second visit with a notepad. He had gone home and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then, he had said yes. The papers were served to him on a Thursday morning, 11 days after surgery, while he was still moving carefully through his own house because his body had not yet stopped reminding him what he had agreed to give. She had no idea what she had just put in motion. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The light in the kitchen was the low gray of an early November morning when Elijah first read the document. That was a Thursday. He had come downstairs at 6:15, slower than usual, one hand on the railing the way the discharge nurse had shown him. Careful, deliberate, weight distributed. He was 11 days out from the surgery. He was healing correctly. He just wasn't healing fast. The envelope had been placed on the kitchen table. Not the counter, the table centered where he would see it when he sat down. He did not recognize the return address. He opened it with the same attention he gave every document, fully, without skipping. He read it twice. Then he folded it back into thirds and set it on the table in front of him and looked at it. He did not throw it. He did not stand up too fast. He sat with it for 4 minutes, which was how long it took the coffee to finish brewing, and then he poured a cup and sat back down with the cup and the document and the low gray light and his own breathing, which was still something he was aware of in a way that he had not been before the surgery. Elijah was a man who had learned, across 20 years in logistics, that the first response to an unexpected development was almost never the right one. The cargo that was missing was usually delayed, not lost. The vendor who said they couldn't deliver usually could. The problem that looked critical at 7 in the morning usually had a solution by 10 if you didn't burn anything down in between. He had learned to wait long enough to understand what he was actually looking at before he decided what to do. He understood what he was looking at. He was looking at the end of 9 years of marriage, filed with the county court 4 days after Camille had been discharged from the ICU, by an attorney whose retainer she had apparently paid before the surgery. He picked up his cup. He drank from it. He set it down. He would figure out what to do about it, not this morning, but soon, and correctly. Elijah had met Camille at 32. He had been 3 years into the operations role that would eventually become his senior management position, and she had been running the marketing department at a distribution company 2 floors above his firm's offices in the same building. They had met in the elevator on a Wednesday in February, and she had made a comment about the coffee he was carrying. Too much, she had said, for one person, and he had said he had a long afternoon ahead of him, and she had said she knew the feeling. He had asked for her number. He had called it that same evening. He was not the kind of man who left things unresolved. They had married at 33. He had been deliberate about it the way he was deliberate about everything. He had thought about it. He had been certain. He had done it completely. He had sold his apartment and bought a house on Mercer Street in both their names. He had spent the first summer of their marriage finishing the basement, so she had a separate home office. She worked from home frequently, and had mentioned once that she needed more space to think. He hadn't mentioned the 4 weekends it took. He just did it, and when it was finished, he showed her, and she had smiled and said it was perfect. He had remembered that smile for 9 years. He was the kind of man who, when Camille's diagnosis came in, polycystic kidney disease, stage 4, the kind of news that arrives in a doctor's office with a particular quality of stillness, had driven her home and made dinner and sat across from her at the table and said, "Tell me what you need." She had said, "I need to not be on that list for 2 years." He had said, "I know." He had gone to the transplant center the following week, on a Tuesday morning, without telling her he was going. He had wanted to know the facts before he involved her in a conversation about them. He had been tested. The results had come back over the following month in stages: blood type, tissue cross-match, kidney function panel, each one arriving in an envelope he opened alone and read fully before deciding what to do with what it said. On the morning the final results confirmed compatibility, he had sat in the same kitchen where he would later read the divorce papers, and he had thought about the 6-week window the center had mentioned. 6 weeks to make the decision. He had thought about load distribution the way he thought about it on a complex routing problem. What happens when you remove one node from a system? Whether the system can continue to function without it. Whether the remaining capacity is sufficient. He had determined his remaining kidney was sufficient. He had gone back to the transplant center on a Thursday and told them yes. He had told Camille that evening. She had cried. He had sat with her while she cried. He had not said that it was nothing because it wasn't nothing. He had said that it was a decision he had made, and he was certain about it. He had been certain. He did not know that she had consulted an attorney 6 weeks before the surgery. He did not know that the retainer had been paid in August, 2 months before he went under. He did not know that she had used the 14 months of the waitlist to arrive at a calculation that she had not shared with him. He was going to find out what the calculation had been. But not that Thursday morning. That morning he had a thermos to fill, and a body that needed to heal, and a document he needed to hand to someone who knew what to do with it. Her name was Lorraine Tate. She was 67 years old, a retired hospital billing administrator who had spent 31 years reading the financial architecture of medical institutions with the precision of someone who understood that the numbers were never just numbers. She was small and straight-backed, with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses she kept on a lanyard that said Memorial Medical in faded blue letters. She had been Elijah's aunt's closest friend for 22 years. She had been watching, in the way that certain women watch, since August. She came to the house on Mercer Street on the Friday evening after the papers arrived. She brought a covered dish his aunt had made and a manila envelope she set on the counter without comment. She sat across from Elijah at the kitchen table. She looked at him for a moment the way a person looks when they are deciding whether to lead with the food or the envelope. She led with the envelope. "I'm going to tell you what I saw," she said, "and then I'm going to show you what I kept. I need you to let me finish before you say anything." Elijah said, "All right." Lorraine had been present at Camille's birthday dinner in August, a gathering Elijah had not attended because of a facility audit that had run through the weekend. She had been in the kitchen when Camille and her sister had been in the adjoining sitting room. She had not announced that she could hear them. She had listened to what she heard. What she heard was Camille's sister ask, in a voice low enough to mean something, "What happens to the house if you file before the surgery?" And Camille's voice, steady and considered, "That's what I've been figuring out." Lorraine opened the envelope. She had written it down that night, The entry was dated August 14th. Neat, precise handwriting. The exact phrasing of what she had heard, in quotation marks, with the time noted beside it. She had kept it because she had known, in the way that women who have spent 30 years reading financial documents know things, that the phrasing mattered. Before the surgery was a timeline. A timeline meant a strategy. A strategy meant a document existed somewhere with Camille's signature on it. "There's more," Lorraine said. She placed the second page on the table. Her contact at the county recorder's office, a woman she had worked beside for 11 of her 31 years, had found an LLC registration filed in September. Camille's name, her sister's name as co-registrant. The listed business purpose was property management. The listed asset was the house on Mercer Street. Elijah looked at the page. He looked at it for a long time. "The LLC was filed," Lorraine said carefully, 6 weeks before your surgery date. He did not say anything. He picked up his coffee cup. He set it back down without drinking from it. "She needed you to go through with it," Lorraine said. Not cruelly. As a fact, delivered the way facts deserve to be delivered, plainly, with the evidence beside them. The transplant gave her 2 things: the kidney, and a husband who couldn't contest anything during recovery. The room was very quiet. "What I don't have," Lorraine said, "is the financial piece. What's in the accounts? What was moved? I'm not a forensic accountant. But I know someone who is." He stood over the documents the way he stood over a routing map when a system had failed, not looking at any single piece, looking at all of it together. Every line connecting. The LLC filed in September. The attorney retained in August. The papers served on day 11 of his recovery, when he was still moving carefully down staircases. It had not been impulsive. It had been sequenced. He had spent 20 years in logistics. He understood sequencing. "She thought the recovery window was the safe window," he said. It wasn't a question. Lorraine said, "She thought you wouldn't be in a position to respond." He looked at her. She was wrong about that. He didn't move fast. That was the part she had not planned for, not because patience was abstract to him, but because patience was professional. In logistics, you did not reroute a shipment in the middle of a weather event. You waited for conditions to stabilize. You assessed the full damage, and then you moved with a plan that accounted for what had actually happened, rather than what you had originally expected. He was still healing when he called Lawrence Briggs. Lawrence was a civil and family law attorney who had handled a property dispute for Elijah's firm 3 years prior. A man who, in Elijah's direct experience, read contracts the way a surgeon read imaging, looking for the specific place where something had broken, not the place that looked most obvious. Lawrence called back at 7:12 the following morning. "I read what you sent," Lawrence said. "I need the full account history. Joint accounts, individual accounts, anything with both names on it. And I need the deed to the house." "The deed is in both names," Elijah said. "It is," Lawrence said. "But that LLC is a problem for her, not for you. You can't transfer an asset into an LLC without the co-owner's written consent. She didn't have your consent, which means the transfer attempt is fraudulent on its face." He paused. "That's before we even get to the timeline." The forensic accountant was a woman named Patricia Givens, who had done municipal auditing for 20 years before she went private. Patricia went through 14 months of account history with the methodical attention of someone who had learned never to trust a round number. What she found was not a round number. It was $38,600, moved across 7 transfers between April and October, from the joint savings account into an account held solely in Camille's name. The transfers had been made in amounts below the threshold that triggered automatic notification. Deliberate amounts. Carefully spaced intervals. She had begun moving money in April, 4 months before the surgery, 6 months before she served papers. Elijah sat with that information for a long time. Not with grief, or not only with grief, with the specific, clarifying recognition of a man who had been reading a problem incorrectly and had just been given the correct variables. He had thought he was building something. He had been. He just had not known that someone else was simultaneously dismantling it. He had given something irrecoverable. He understood that. The surgery had happened and his body had changed permanently, and that was not something a court document could address. What a court document could address was everything else. The house on Mercer Street, in both their names, which she had attempted to fold into an LLC without his signature. The $38,600 that had been methodically moved. The attorney retainer paid before he went under anesthesia. Lawrence filed a fraud action in December and a counterpetition for division of the marital estate. The LC filing was challenged on the consent grounds within the same week. Camille called him on a Tuesday afternoon in December, 3 weeks after the filings. Her voice, when he answered, had the particular quality of someone who had received information they had not expected and was now reassembling their approach. She said she thought they could handle this between themselves, without it going to court. She said she hoped they could both get through it with their dignity intact. He listened to the entire message. Then he listened to it again, noting the progression, where the warmth was concentrated, where it thinned, where the pressure came through beneath it. He called Lawrence and told him about the call. Lawrence said, "She's looking for an exit from the fraud exposure. The LLC was the mistake. She knows it now." "What do we do?" Elijah said. "We let her think she's found one," Lawrence said, "and then we show up to the meeting." Lawrence arrived 25 minutes early to the conference room on the 11th floor of the Briggs & Associates offices. Elijah arrived 20 minutes after that. He was 5 minutes early, by any reasonable accounting. He walked without a cane now. He moved carefully still. He likely always would in certain ways. But he moved. The room had the spare, neutral quality of a space that had been designed to belong to no one. Long table. High windows showing a December sky, flat and white. 4 chairs on each side. Nothing on the walls. Patricia Givens arrived with the bound report, which she set in front of the chair beside Lawrence without ceremony. They arranged their materials in silence. The room smelled like recycled air and cold coffee from a carafe no one had touched. Camille arrived at 10 minutes past the hour. Her attorney, a man named Douglas Webb, gray suit, careful posture, came in directly behind her. They sat. She set a folder on the table in front of her. She looked at Elijah once, directly, with the composed expression of a woman who had prepared what this moment would look like from her side of the table. Lawrence opened without preamble. "Before any discussion of settlement terms," he said, "several matters require acknowledgement. We'll be presenting documentation in sequence." He placed the first page on the center of the table. Between April 7th and October 22nd of this year, 7 transfers were executed from the joint savings account held by Elijah and Camille Wade. The total transferred was $38,600. These transfers were made to an account held solely in Camille Wade's name and were not disclosed to Elijah Wade. He let the page sit there. A forensic accounting report documenting the full transfer history is available for review. He nodded to Patricia, who placed the bound report on the table. The report documents the transfer dates, amounts, and destination account. It also documents the withdrawal pattern specifically, that each transfer was structured below the threshold for automatic joint account notification. Douglas Webb was reading. His pen was set down. Lawrence placed the second document. On September 14th, a limited liability company was registered with the county recorder's office. The registered entity is listed as Mercer Street Property Management, LLC. The registered agents are Camille Wade and her sister. The listed asset is the property at 1140 Mercer Street, the marital home, held jointly. He paused. This registration was executed without the knowledge or written consent of Elijah Wade, who holds equal title to the listed asset. Under state property law, the unilateral filing of a jointly held property into a business entity without co-owner consent constitutes fraudulent transfer. A civil action on those grounds was filed on December 3rd. Camille had not moved. She was holding very still in the specific way that people hold still when the motion they are suppressing is large. The third matter, Lawrence said, concerns timing. He set the final page on the table. It showed 2 dates in parallel columns. The attorney retainer, paid August 6th. The transplant surgery, October 11th. The divorce petition was filed October 22nd, 11 days after the surgery from which Mr. Wade was still recovering. The retainer for that filing was paid 66 days before the surgery. He let the columns sit there, visible, and said nothing else about them. He didn't need to. The room went quiet for 9 seconds. Elijah counted them the way he counted everything, accurately, without sentiment. Douglas Webb looked at his client. She looked at the table. Lawrence said, "We'll allow a few minutes for your counsel to review." Elijah stood. He set his hand flat on the table for 1 moment. Not dramatic, just steady, and then he straightened. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Patricia's hand. He picked up nothing from the table because he had brought nothing to the table that wasn't already inside him. He walked to the door. He turned once. He looked at Camille, only at her. He said it quietly, without any performance in it. It was not for the room. It was the one sentence that had been true since August, since the surgery, since the morning he read the papers at the kitchen table. "I made a decision I was certain about," he said. "You made one you were counting on me not to survive well enough to answer." He walked out without looking back. It did not happen all at once. The fraud action settled in March. The $38,600 was ordered returned to the joint estate before any division occurred. The loose registration was invalidated on the consent grounds Lawrence had identified in December, which meant the house on Mercer Street remained a jointly held marital asset, subject to standard division. Not the asset-stripping structure Camille had attempted to arrange before he went into the operating room. The settlement took 6 months in total. What Camille walked away with was exactly what her actions had made available to her. Not more, not less. The deliberate sequencing she had constructed had been met with an equally deliberate sequencing from the other side of the table. The outcome was proportional in the way that outcomes are when the evidence is complete and the attorney reads every page. She was not destroyed. She was reduced to the life her choices had built. There is a difference. Elijah sold the house on Mercer Street in April and bought a place on the north side of the city, a single story with a good kitchen and a yard he had plans for. He still moved carefully in certain ways. He suspected he always would. He had decided early on, in the weeks after the surgery, that the body he came out of the operating room with was simply the one he had now, and that it was sufficient for what he needed to do. His logistics team gave him a hard time, gently, about the thermos he had started carrying again by February. He had been back at his desk full-time since January. He gave accurate timelines. He hit them. His aunt came over on a Saturday in May and helped him unpack the last boxes. She set a plant on the kitchen windowsill. A small succulent, no card, just the plant. He asked her what kind it was. She said she didn't know. She said to water it once a week, and it would do fine. He watered it on Sundays. It did fine. On a clear June evening, 7 months after the conference room and nearly a year after the surgery, Elijah sat in a chair on the back patio of the house on the north side. The yard was not finished yet. He had started it in May. The grading, the lawn, the section along the south fence where he was planning something he hadn't fully decided on. It was a project in progress. He was not in a hurry. The evening was warm. A radio was playing somewhere 3 houses over, low enough to be texture rather than sound. He had a glass of water on the arm of the chair that he had forgotten to drink. He sat there for a long time. He thought once about the kitchen on Mercer Street, the thermos on the counter. The morning he read the papers with the low gray light coming through the window and his body still reminding him what he had agreed to give. He thought about the decision he had made. He had been certain about it. He was still certain. The certainty had not required her to deserve it. It had required him to be someone who made decisions he stood behind. He stood up. He picked up the glass. He went inside. He turned off the kitchen light. He looked at the plant on the windowsill for a moment. Then he went to bed and let the house settle into the night. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.